Welcome back to the Word on Fire Show. I'm Matthew Petrusek, Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute and the host of the Word on Fire Show. Thank you for joining us. A wave of fresh converts has entered the Catholic Church in the United States, Australia, and parts of Europe. The evidence for this surge is far from anecdotal. Even secular media outlets that are inclined to ignore positive stories about Catholicism widely reported packed sanctuaries this past Easter, the day those who have been preparing to enter the Catholic Church typically receive their first sacraments. This is very welcome news for a church that has grown accustomed to narratives of disaffiliation and decline. So what's behind this uptick in conversions? What factors are leading young people, and young men in particular, to buck the trends of secularization and become Catholic? What is happening both in the world and within the church that is making the faith so attractive? And perhaps most importantly, what should Catholics, clergy, and laity alike do to continue the momentum? Here to offer insight on what's driving the growth and why now more than ever we should double our efforts to proclaim Christ in the culture is Bishop Robert Barron. Bishop, welcome back to the studio.
Thanks, Matt.
So today we have a happy topic, the recent surge of new converts entering the church this past Easter, as we're recording this. Easter is just a couple weeks ago. But before we get to that, everybody always wants to know, what have you been up to recently?
Well, recently, confirmation season's coming to a close. So here we now, like the 2 months after Easter, we do all the confirmations. So I've been going all over this diocese, north to south, east to west, a lot of driving. I get a kick out of going to all these places, seeing the kids, and often have dinner, with the parish staff, the people involved with their training. So it's a good chance to really get, plugged into the diocese. But that's coming to a close. It's also a bit of a workout. Talk to any bishop. They'll tell you confirmation season's a bit of a workout, But it's been good. And, the usual names, the always popular names. Sebastian is always number one for the young guys. For the girls, probably Therese or Cecilia would be the most popular names. So all the musicians take Cecilia. Therese, it's, Therese Lisieux, this young girl, who spent a few years of her life in a convent and then died at 24, but has this massive impact on the life of the church. This year I noticed that Moses the Black has made a comeback. When I first began confirming out in California, there were a lot of Moses the Black. I had no idea who that was. So I looked him up. Interesting fellow, patristic figure who was a life as a thief and a murderer and everything. And then he comes to Christ and then becomes like a desert father. So kind of a cool story. So a lot of the young guys take that name, Moses the Black. Anyway, confirmation season.
That's beautiful. Well, let's now turn to today's topic, and it's the empirically verifiable surge. So it's not just anecdotal in new conversions to the faith. And before we look at some of the potential causes of that surge, and then moving to how we can keep the momentum, just want to get some numbers on the table. So here, drawing on our friends at EWTN, EWTN News contacted all 175 Latin Rite dioceses in the United States, of which 71 responded. And of those 71 dioceses, 93% of them share with the EWTN that they were seeing a very substantial increase in new converts this year, compared to converts this year compared to previous years. So 93%. Some diocesan highlights include a 57% increase in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma, a 30% increase in the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey, and a 35% increase in the Archdiocese of Mobile, Alabama. And finally, catechumens, for our audience who may not know, those are those in the process of entering the church, are also on the rise. So, for example, in the Diocese of Pueblo, Colorado, there's a 105% increase in catechumens. The Diocese of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 77% increase. In Boston, a 55% increase, which means all things considered, there's actually more people entering the church in next year and in future years. And finally, we want to note that we are also seeing this growth across parts of Europe, especially in Great Britain and France, and in Australia as well. So Bishop, two questions to start us off here. One, are you seeing this kind of growth in your own diocese here in Winona, Rochester? And two, are you surprised by these numbers?
Yes and no. First, the yes. The last year, we set the record for the number of new people entering the church, and then we broke it this year.
Yeah, that's right. Praise God.
So I go back in my mind to the rite of election mass, when we gather everybody, and they couldn't all come, of course, but big crowds the last couple of years. So it's part of this national trend, indeed international trend. It had been kind of like rumored or bandied about or suggested, but now it's impossible to deny. As you say, the numbers are just clearly in place. They're undeniable. So that's good news. No other way to slice that one. It's good news. Am I surprised by it? No, and we can go into this, I suppose, a lot of the reasons why. I think there's a revival going on for a number of reasons. And so the people seeking out the church, they want something substantive. They want something ritually disciplined.
Yeah.
They want a concrete expression of religiosity. So it doesn't surprise me they're turning to the church.
And it's really important to emphasize in all this that these are young people who are entering the church.
Absolutely. As I think of those two rites of election masses, the church is filled with young people.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to see. Well, let's now turn to some possible causes for this. And again, we have an eye to the question of how can we continue this momentum.
Yeah.
Let's start with what's happening out in the world, out in the culture, and then we'll look at some things that might be happening in the church. Especially, what kinds of events or trends are you seeing or have you seen in secular culture that you think might be contributing to making the faith so much more attractive?
Well, I've argued now for a while that the new atheists left behind a sort of bleak landscape, a grim view of life. Go back 25 years now when the new atheists were all the vogue. I get how they appealed, especially to young people who always have a rebellious spirit, who would probably see religion as the bastion of the establishment. And so when these clever, smart, articulate guys come on TV and they're debunking religion, they're attacking it for its corruption, I get it, how young people all over the world are stick it to religion. And, mind you, too, when the new atheists were writing, Harris and Hitchens and Dawkins and company, that was the height of the sex abuse scandal. So the church's corruption in that way was being revealed. Mm-hmm. And then they come along with this kind of brutal intellectual critique. It did some damage, and it appealed to the sort of native rebellious instincts of a lot of young people. But then here's my argument. So, okay, I get all that. But now in the wake of it, so you've read your Hitchens and Dawkins, and you say, oh, yeah, stick it to religion. But what are you left with? Yeah. Well, Dawkins is, admirably honest about it. There's no God. That means there's no purpose. We came from nothing. We're going nowhere. There's no meaning. What does he say? Like, it's just the universe is this pitiless indifference to us and our project. Well, that leaves you in a pretty terrible place, psychologically and spiritually, a desolate, blasted landscape. Mm-hmm. And I think it dawns on people, like, well, this is kind of a hopeless view. And then, see, our greatest ally as religious people is the Augustinian heart, right? Lord, you made us for yourself, therefore our heart is restless till it rests in thee. That has remained true across human experience. The goods of the world satisfy us to a degree, and then it wears off. We take joy in various things in the world, but we don't take the joy we're looking for. Mm-hmm. Think of, the U2 song, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. That's a very Augustinian song. I've done this, I've done that, I've climbed the highest mountain, I've gone, and I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Right. Good. That's a healthy psychological and spiritual attitude. It's the quest for God, see. I think a lot of people, especially younger people, who grew up in the blasted landscape of the new atheists have realized, no, my heart is restless and it needs something beyond, all right, this world, I guess, and get as much pleasure and as much, power you can out of it. That's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And so in the measure that religious people are able to present the religious thing in an attractive way, it will appeal to the searching heart. I think that's what you're seeing. I think that's why this is happening.
Do you think this is conclusive evidence that sort of the new atheist movement has died?
Please God. Yeah, see, something I said, and I'll claim this, from the time they emerged, and they're all the rage, and they're so smart. They're not smart. They were just rehearsing these old, tired arguments that go back to Marx and Freud and Nietzsche and company. There was nothing new about them except they were nasty. They were kind of purposely obnoxious toward religious people. So I was never impressed by them. Like at Dawkins, I get what his scientific field is, cellular biology or something. Fine. I'm sure he's great in that field. He was terrible in philosophy.
As a philosopher, right,
terrible.
yeah.
I mean, made elementary mistakes in the way he was formulating things. Hitchens, look whom I admired as a writer and as a rhetorician. I always loved listening to Christopher Hitchens. I read a lot of his books. Great stylist, great sort of personality. Loved all that. But as a philosopher, I mean, making elementary mistakes over and over again. So these people were not impressive intellectually. They were flashy, and they were provocative, and they appealed, therefore, to a lot of younger people. Now, here's another thing about it. So I think worth pointing out. I think in God's providence, they called forth now a whole generation of Christian and Catholic apologists and theologians. See, 'cause I'll tell you one thing. Speaking as a theologian, a trained theologian who taught and wrote theology, boy, did we ignore apologetics. Because I can tell you right from the heart of the academy, apologetics. Catechesis. I don't do that. Oh, it's popular. Yeah, great. But see, Thomas Aquinas did it.
Yeah.
Anselm did it. Origen did it. Augustine did it. Our greatest theologians, yes, did highly speculative stuff for their fellow academics. But they all, everyone I mentioned, Newman did it. They all did, for one better term, apologetics, trying to make a case for the faith to a skeptical audience. My generation, believe me, everyone that trained me poo-pooed all that. Oh, no. I'm not doing that. I'm doing serious theology.
They also saw it as kind of like combative too, right?
Yeah, it's right. It's not worthy of me, and that was a giant mistake. Giant mistake. In the measure that theologians only talk to fellow academicians, only talk to, people in the high university culture, that's fine. Aquinas did that too. Augustine did that too. But you should never eschew apologetics and helping people understand, well, here are objections. Here's how you might respond to them. That was a giant mistake, and boy, we suffered from it. I've said this before. I'll say it again. With the great exception of William Lane Craig, who during that awful time came forward like a great warrior, and he took on the new atheists, and he brought to bear, our rich intellectual tradition. But with the exception of Craig, that was a terrible performance by Christian apologists because we had dropped our weapons and we forgot how to use them.
Yeah.
They were, Christian apologists were like, they were like Fredo in The Godfather, fumbling with his gun because he you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We had forgotten how to use these weapons. That was a mistake, and we suffered from it. So this is leading to my positive point that in the wake of the new atheists, I think it awakened a new generation of Catholic thinkers who are geared toward apologetics. Good.
What do you think about the increasing sort of digitization of life and the breakdown of real relationships and the sort of loss of a connection to the permanent and the real? Are you seeing that also leading?
Yeah. And, again, here we'll do positive and negative because I think the digital revolution has had a very positive impact on this question. But the things you're pointing to I think are dead right. I often compare my childhood with the way kids are coming of age today. And I know I sound like grandpa, but I much prefer the way I came of age. My mother would, put a T-shirt on me and I'd run out the door in the house. I'd come back at 6 p.m. for dinner. And I spent the entire day outside with my friends, climbing on jungle gyms and riding my bike and playing baseball and also learning how to deal with people. So this guy's a jerk. How do you handle that? Hey, this guy, he's terrific. And I'm interacting with friends and enemies and quasi-friends. And what was I learning, as we all were, basic social skills, Again, I sound like a grandpa, but there's something about this turning inward around our little machines and our shoulders hunched and we're inside and we're just dealing virtually with the world. Give me my childhood any day over that.
Right.
But I think you're right in suggesting, too, it's got religious implications because ritual and tradition and liturgy and coming together to worship God. But that's a big part of my childhood memory. Because for my parents, missing Mass on Sunday would be like cutting your hand off. You just wouldn't dream of it, right? Well, okay, it becomes a structuring element of our lives that we went to Mass on Sunday and we heard the scriptures and we received the Eucharist and we heard a sermon and we talked about it and we knew the priest and we met people there. Yeah, that's an integral part of life. Mm-hmm. You lose that and you're lost in your little devices. God help you.
So we'll move to potentially some things that are happening within the church that are also contributing to this rise in conversions. Before we do, you've been on the evangelical field for over 25 years.
Yeah.
We just celebrated 25 years of Word on Fire in particular. How would you describe sort of most fundamentally the shift in culture that you've seen out there that's creating these openings for new conversions? If you had to sort of summarize it.
Well, a big part of it, I think, is that blasted landscape I talked about. But I also think, and I think Word on Fire is part of it. This is the positive side of the digital world. The digital world has allowed articulate and compelling Christians to make themselves available in the wider culture. Just as the new atheists were evangelizers for their position, well, okay, two can play at that game. And Christians were able, through the social media, to get the Christian thing out in a way that was intellectually compelling. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you stories from the earliest days of my engagement on YouTube. So I did a lot of videos about the new atheists because that was exactly when we were starting, as when they were, all the rage. So I would take them on and I'd argue. Well, I think for a lot of people, they never dreamed there was anything like an argument that religious people could make. I never dreamed of it. I've never heard that before. What? Yeah. That's what you think about God? And really? It's because, again, we were afraid-o. We dropped our weapons and we forgot how to use them. So that side of the digital world I love. It gave us an opportunity to reach people that would never come to our buildings. Mm-hmm. See, when I was coming of age, it's still, I saw it at the Youth Synod in Rome a couple years ago, 5 years ago, longer, 7 years ago. Well, let's get more programs to bring these young people to our churches. And I got up at that synod and I said, brothers, that's not it. They're not going to come to our churches. Yeah. We have to find a way to get to them. And I think we found it through the social media. And I mean, look at the ministries you can name besides our own that are just flourishing. When I was a young kid in the Chicago area, and I'm interested in religion because of Thomas Aquinas, and I'm going to the library to get Mortimer Adler's big, volume of Aquinas. That's what I'm reading. If you wanted to get a book of Catholic theology or apologetics, I lived in Chicago area, which is big, Catholic. I'd have to get in a car, drive 45 minutes to get to this, I forget the name of it now. There was a Catholic bookstore. It was pretty good. Drive there, look through the shelves, find a book, typically, or if I'm looking for a book, oh no, we don't have that, we'll have to order that for you. And then they'd order it, and maybe in 6 weeks it would show up. I'd have to go back to the store to get it. Now,
it's there.
Yep, there it is. I got a question. Oh, there's a very smart person telling me about it. Oh, that's a great grace. I think God, who always knows how to make good out of evil, has taken even the dark side of the social media, but has used it as a vehicle for communicating the faith. Mm-hmm. That's a major change in the culture that has helped the project.
Now, turning to the church itself and the interior life, questions about liturgy are oftentimes sort of seen as a very inside baseball, even navel-gazing. Howard, do you think, Bishop, that a renewed attention to the liturgy and the Mass might be having a positive impact on young people entering the church?
Yeah, I think so to some degree. People come, as Chesterton knew, through all kinds of different doors. There isn't one door to enter the church. And for some people, the liturgy is that door. That they find it in its beauty and its simplicity and its structure, something deeply appealing. That can happen. I've seen it happen. I've often argued that beauty is the first, step It's the first of the transcendentals. Now, I think it's rare, however, that someone just kind of stumbles on the liturgy, It can happen that way. Think of the young Lustiger wandering into a Gothic cathedral as a young Jewish kid and being basically converted by it. So that can happen. But my own view is that I think we use the social media to kind of engage people and answer questions and try to draw them in and then get them to come, At that point, yes, the liturgy, I think, can be very powerful and can speak deeply to people. But it might not be the first step for a lot. The first step, I think, is this outreach. And with C.S. Lewis there, he said, before the evangelist speaks, an apologist should speak to clear up questions and overcome obstacles and all that. And then let, Billy Graham come and evangelize. But first, there's a lot of static. There's a lot of obstacles in the way. And he thought an apologist like himself, could clear up a lot of that.
One of my favorite Bishop Barronisms is a rejection of banners and balloons Catholicism. Do you think that we've turned the corner on that in the church?
I do.
Even and the aesthetic element of that too?
Yeah, I do. And it's really interesting. And I've always felt, I'm not the one to do it because I don't know how to write novels, but someone should write a Tom Wolfe-like novel about the period when I came of age, like the late 60s and the 70s. It would be very interesting. Some sprawling, funny, Dickensian, Tom Wolfian sort of story about all of that. Because to go, from Gregorian chant and Gothic cathedrals and Thomas Aquinas to what I came of age, which indeed were banners and balloons and 3-chord guitar songs. And relevance, and appealing to kids. But the repudiation of the deep wealth of our own tradition in favor of something very superficial was a tragedy. And then look at our church buildings going from Gothic and Romanesque cathedrals to brutalist modernism. I mean, how any
Spaceships.
of this, how any of this contributed to evangelization? I think it was just the opposite. So, look, a lot of my life has been, trying to recover from that period and propose something better. But I do think we've turned the corner. I think people understand. There's some now very aged people who would, I think, still be clinging to those moves. How the word relevance become a joke, because it was so overused when I was coming out to make relevant. No, the idea is to be Christological. It is to present Christ as something true, beautiful, compelling. That's what the church's job is. And then he becomes thereby relevant to every age, But when you try, you water him down, or intellectually you give speeches to our culture despises all the time. You dumb down the faith. You flatten it out. You make it banal rather than beautiful. To my mind, those are all bad moves.
You've also highlighted in previous conversations the importance of mysticism sort of running through all of this. You think that's also something that's now more present in the church life of the church?
Well, yes, and to press that one, see, if you really want to, my book, The Strangest Way, I talk about this a lot, but go back to someone like Descartes. Go back to the founders of modern philosophy, and you'll see the elements right there, There's a dualism in Descartes. There's a prioritization of a kind of mathematicized view of reality. There's a flattening out in favor of a rationalism. The mystical, the strange, the surprising, the supra-rational, see all that. The rationalism of modernity. Now, right in Descartes' lifetime, someone like Pascal saw right through that program.
He did, right.
Pascal, every bit as brilliant as Descartes, mathematically, scientifically, but saw right through that program. But see what happened, we adopted the Cartesian program in 1970 in a big way. And what we needed was a Pascal to come and again see through it. But I do think that's happening. And Pascal would speak, the heart has its reasons that reason knows not. That's an appeal to the mystical.
Right. So a piece of so-called common wisdom that some in the church have been repeating for the past 50 plus years is that the only hope we have to really evangelize young people is to update, meaning to change the church's teachings on marriage and sexuality and the exclusively male nature of the priesthood. So, Bishop, how should we interpret the surge in new converts among young people, especially in relation to the claim that the church needs to modernize its teaching?
It's nonsense. The people coming to the church are coming despite liberalism, not because of it. So that's that old lie that goes back to 1970, that if we liberalize and we modernize and we adapt to the modern world, they'll come rushing in. Au contraire, the opposite happened. In the measure that we did that, people ran away from the church. Yeah. They did, and that's demonstrable. And what's happening is, in the measure that we are faithful to Christ, people will come to the church. It's not a church that accommodates to the world that is appealing. It's the church that's strange. And again, that's when I wrote the book a long time ago. I called it on purpose The Strangest Way. We're a strange path, Christianity. To make it ordinary, accessible, easy, that was the mentality of my day. It worked the opposite effect, you know? And I think we're witnessing it's despite that kind of superficial liberalism that people are coming back, not because of it.
Well, before turning to our listener question, let's look at get some of your advice on how to keep this momentum going. So, Bishop, what in your view is not happening in the church evangelically right now that you really wish were happening?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Or not happening enough?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I really like, as I say, the digital work that's being done in this sort of renaissance in Catholic apologetics. I think that's really good. So maybe, more of that needs to be done. I do think attention to the liturgy is important and to lead with beauty. Prayer for people to come to the church, that's number one, that we pray for it. But I think the revival of a healthy apologetics, we need more and more of that.
In the past, you've quoted Cardinal George's recognition that the church started off without institutions.
Yeah, right.
And of course, we built many institutions, and many of those institutions, unfortunately, have failed us in different ways. Do you think that it's a time for rebuilding of institutions in the church?
Well, reshaping with evangelical purpose. So I think Cardinal George's point was that, that in the beginning of the church, there was no Vatican, no chancery offices, no dioceses, no auxiliary bishops. But there were evangelists, he said. There were evangelists. And I think what he meant was that's what animates the church up and down the ages. And so if we have institutions, they serve evangelization, not the other way around.
Right.
But see, that happens a lot. And I get it. We're all sinners. We're all fallen. Our institutions become self-referential. They serve themselves. They want to perpetuate themselves as institutions, losing the sense that their entire purpose is evangelization. And think of, I've been in these conversations a lot over the past 10 years as a bishop. Our schools, what's the purpose? Evangelization. That's the purpose of the entire church. Oh, well, when we can't evangelize, our school will close. So what? Then close it. I don't want another bland public school that I'm paying for. No, the whole purpose of it is to evangelize.
Yeah.
But we have non-Catholics. Fine, but I want to evangelize them. That's why they're in a Catholic school. If their parents don't know that, they're not paying attention. And so, I'm not going to proselytize. I'm not going to require and knock people over the head. But if they're in a Catholic school, they're going to be offered evangelization. That's the whole point of it. Right. Cardinal George has always, had this way of getting right to the heart of it. So there were evangelists is a way of saying evangelization must be underneath and informing all of our institutions.
So you've noted the great benefits of social media and the internet more broadly in evangelization. But of course, and we've touched on this a few times over the various shows, that the dark side of social media that may indeed be getting darker in real time. Bishop, do you think there's sort of a saturation point we reach as evangelists where we should maybe sort of pull back from evangelizing online and focus more on in-person kinds of encounters?
No, it's always all of the above. It's never one or the other. We do all those things. My purpose as an online evangelist is to bring people to church, ultimately. That's why I'm always happy when I hear I'm out on the road and people say, I'm becoming a Catholic because I started with Word on Fire, or I started watching your sermons and now I'm coming to church. Good. That's what I want.
That's the goal.
I don't want them, hey, I watch your sermons and I'm a Bishop Barron groupie and I mean, all right, but I want you in church. I want you at Mass, So can we evangelize or even like pre-evangelize using media? Sure. But it's no substitute for the one-on-one, I've come to know Christ. I want you to know Christ. And now I want you to share his life in the liturgy in the church. Mm-hmm. That's the heart of it.
So a New York Times article recently came out with this title, New York's hottest club is a Catholic church. So the question connected to that is how can we take where we are now, which is with good momentum, and make sure that it doesn't become a trend in the sense of, well, it's going to die out as soon as it becomes unfashionable again?
Yeah, I would say the good, the true, and the beautiful. Always be aware of that. The good, which is the church's work on behalf of the poor and the homeless and the needy. And, Ratzinger said the church does those three things, and one of them is it serves the poor. So we keep doing that. But then there's the true. The church should get its message, its arguments, its intellectual tradition out there. And then the beautiful, that's where liturgy, prayer, processions, litanies, all of it come in. Do those three things. Be attentive to the true, the good, and the beautiful, and I think people will be attracted to it.
Finally, Bishop, what advice you have for all the new converts out there, especially sort of recognizing that they're probably on fire for the faith right now? What kind of pitfalls should they be aware of as they grow deeper in the life of faith?
Cultivate the flame. Don't let it go out. In other words, you maybe got this little flame in your hands are cupped around it, but you got to cultivate it. And that means you have to practice the faith, especially Mass, especially prayer, reading, study, doing the works of mercy. You participate in the good, the true, and the beautiful, and develop and foster the faith. So it's not like just a given, okay, one and done. No, now you start this great adventure. You're like the Israelites escaped from Egypt, but now you're crossing the desert, and you just got to be attentive. And there'll be the temptation, that archetypal story, at least in Egypt we had enough to eat, and at least we, that's a basic instinct. Like, okay, I've taken this plunge. I've left the slavery of, my former life, but I get drawn back into it. Resist that. Keep following Moses.
It's now time for our listener question. Today we have Jesse from the Czech Republic, who's asking about whether he should baptize his young daughters before he himself is baptized into the church.
Hi, Bishop Barron. My name is Jesse and I live in the Czech Republic. After listening to your sermons and reading the Bible for almost 2 years, I've decided to finally enroll in the RCIA program, which I'm beginning next week. My question to you is, I have 2 young daughters, and should I wait to have them baptized until I myself am baptized? Or should I endeavor to do this before I am baptized as their father? Thank you for all the hard work you and your team at Word on Fire do.
Yeah, it reminds me of my great visit to the Czech Republic a couple years ago in Prague. Look, I want people to be baptized whenever they can. And so, a parent is the first teacher of their children in the ways of the faith. So in a way, it makes sense. I mean, if you're initiated and then you would help your kids. Look, technically, as long as you are approving of this and you have no objection to the child being baptized and you are committed to raising your child in the faith, there's no canonical problem with that. Something in me is saying maybe you should all get baptized at the same time. If you're in the OCIA program right now, I don't know how old your kids are, but what I would do, honestly, talk to your parish priest. He would give better advice. He would know you better and the details of your family. That'd be my advice, is talk to your parish priest about it.
Well, thanks so much, Jesse, for reaching out to us. If you would like to ask Bishop Barron a question for a future Word on Fire show, please visit askbishopbarron.com. Again, that's askbishopbarron.com. We're always grateful to hear from you. Well, Bishop, we've completed another show.
Yeah.
Thanks for the conversation. Looking forward to the next one.
Always a pleasure, Matt. Thanks.
That does it for us today. Thanks for joining us on the Word on Fire show. If you're interested in learning more about how Word on Fire can help you grow closer to Christ, become a better evangelist with and for others, and work for the common good, consider joining the Word on Fire Institute. Check us out at institute.wordonfire.org. That's institute.wordonfire.org. We'll see you next time.